Good morning, and welcome to the sixth Sunday of Easter, or, for the rest of us, the sermon for May 9th, 2021. So, this Sunday, I am looking at a reading from the Gospel of John. It's John chapter 15, verses 9 through 17. And there's a lot of little phrases. And every single one of them, you could just take that one phrase, that one sentence, and study it for a lifetime. That's the nature of these few verses. So the two phrases that I want to look at in this bit is when Jesus is talking about joy. Because in an overarching way, Jesus is talking to his disciples about what he wants them to take away from all of his stories and all of his teaching, from his whole ministry on earth. Because it's not going to last a whole lot longer at this point in the story. He's giving them his last will and testament. He's trying to impress upon them why he's here. And in the midst of all of this, he talks very briefly about joy. And he says that he said these things to them so that his own joy, Jesus' own joy, may be in them, and that their own joy, the people who are hearing this, his students, his devotees, his friends, that their joy may be complete. So he's giving them all of these teachings, he's giving them all of these commandments so that they can be completely joyful. Let's think about that for a second. What he's saying is that he is completely joyful. And that the things he's telling them, if they put them into action, they have the potential to make them completely joyful. And the stuff he's telling them is interpersonal stuff. It's how to be with the people around you. And he's talking about love. He's talking about loving each other, loving other people, love, 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 love. And he's saying, I'm telling you all these things so that you can be genuinely happy all the time. That is a large claim. That is a large claim. To be genuinely happy all the time. Or if you will, to have complete joy. Now, some people do like to split the hair between happiness and joy. And joy, they discern, is bigger, holier, ephemeral. Not really for them. That's kind of the underlying message. And happiness is fleeting. Happiness is a cheeseburger or chocolate. Happiness is earthly. Happiness is tainted. That's the underlying message. It's fleeting and tainted. Whereas joy, in these sorts of arguments, is holy and kind of out of your reach. But there are other ways to think about happiness/joy. And I really appreciate the research that's been done on this subject. And some of that research talks about people who win the lottery. And there has been research done on the happiness of people who win the lottery. And what the data seems to tell us is that people who win the lottery have a spike of happiness. And then a few months later, in time, that spike of happiness comes back down and they are about as happy as they were before. Which means that if they were fairly miserable SOBs, they get back to being fairly miserable SOBs. Winning the lottery did not actually make them happy. It made them happy for a short period of time, but it didn't last. And so we can see why perhaps people argue, oh, happiness doesn't last, happiness doesn't last. Well, but that's other people. There's so many people who weigh in on this. Another argument we can have for lasting happiness versus happiness that does not last is that when you try to find happiness or joy outside of yourself, what you find does not last. When you find happiness and joy inside of yourself, your baseline of happiness increases. Your baseline of joy increases. So what does this mean then, to find happiness or joy outside of yourself versus inside of yourself? Okay, so if I decide that the bag of potato chips is going to make me happy, that's me looking for happiness outside of myself, because the bag of potato chips is literally outside of myself, at least at the beginning of this argument. I'm about to consume it. Food, caffeine, sex, intimate relationships even. All of these things are outside of ourselves. If only I can get a good job, then I'll be happy. Okay, a good job may help you pay your bills. And so there's that. It may decrease the amount of stress in your life. But if you weren't happy before your good job, chances are you're not going to be happy after it either. Because happiness is actually about something else. If you weren't happy before the bag of potato chips was consumed, you may get a spike of pleasure, a spike of satisfaction. You may get a sense of comfort from eating, if eating makes you feel comfortable. But your baseline happiness is not going to change because you consumed the bag of potato chips. In fact, you may regret in time consuming the entire bag of potato chips in one sitting, in which case your baseline happiness has now decreased. Ditto an entire box of donuts. So when Jesus talks about sharing the joy that he has and offering ways to have his students and his friends' joy become complete, it seems like what he's saying is, here's the way you increase your baseline happiness. So what is he saying? He's talking about learning how to love other people. Now, this isn't romantic love. This isn't having sex and a great orgasm. This isn't a fleeting relationship. Jesus is talking about learning how to actually love other people that perhaps you are not inclined to love. Yes, loving all the people that God gave us in this world, whom we like, whom we love, people who like us, people who prefer our company. Yes, we can practice on all of these people in loving our neighbors as ourselves. But Jesus is not, his arguments are not exclusively to the people in our lives that are easy to love. Jesus is looking at everybody. The ones who are easy to love, the ones who are hard to love. The ones we agree with, the ones we disagree with. The ones who just we get along with so well. And the ones who rub us the wrong way from the go, from the absolute start. And Jesus is saying, if you can learn how to love the people who annoy you, your baseline happiness will increase. So let's think about that. What would your life be like if all of the people who stress you out no longer stressed you out? Because that's another way to look at this. What if you are no longer annoyed by what people do? What if the actions and words of other people could no longer anger you? Now, let's take a step back for a moment, because people do things that are unjust to others. Absolutely. Not saying they don't. What would the world look like if we could act to change that, to right wrongs, to rebalance injustice so that we lived in a more just world, or dare I hope, an entirely just world? But what if we could do that without the rage that tears us up inside, without the pain that breaks our hearts over and over and over again? What if we could right wrongs and make our society more just, while filled with a sense of hope and love, rather than feeling like we can do nothing less because our hearts have been broken too many times? You know, if we could get the same result and also be calm and happy, I don't know about you, but if I can get the same result and be calm and happy, I would like to sign up for calm and happy. Because I know what stress is. I know what anxiety is. I have lived a life just as you have, where there is fear and there is anger and there is pain and there is injustice. And to be quite honest, I'd like some more peace. And I'd like some more love. And I'd like a whole side salad of joy. So what Jesus is telling us is that this is not a fantasy. This is not a dream. This is not a pie in the sky hope that has no basis in reality or no merits as a way to truly live. Jesus is saying that this is how he wants us to live. And the reason he wants us to live this way is not because it's somehow esoterically, morally better than another way, but because it will genuinely make us happy. And when I think about that, I think about this question of what is inside of you and what is outside of you, and that the things that are outside of you are not going to make you happy for long. They're not going to change your baseline happiness. So what I think about, and this gets a little woo-woo, this gets a little spiritual, but you know, I'm preaching. So if there's a time for spiritual, perhaps it is now. What I think about this is that if we look at Jesus's instructions for living a joyful, happy life, And we think about them in terms of, if you remove these stressors, these anxieties, these fears, these pains, and these hatreds, if you remove them from your life, there will be more room for joy. You will be happier. What I think about is that our natural state, I'm not saying our natural state as humans. No. I'm saying our natural state as children of God. And for the record, I include everybody and everything. Our natural state as children of God is actually joy. And the pain distracts us from that. It closes the doors to joy inside of our souls. The anger, the fear, the worry, the concern, the annoyance distracts us from our natural state as children of God, of joy. And love opens up the doors inside of our souls that hide the memory of God. That is what love does. That is why to love your neighbor as yourself is like loving God, because it reminds us of how God is. And then we start acting like our Creator, and we remember that we are like our Creator. Oh, we can faff about and be distracted, but that's somehow not as real as opening the door inside our hearts and our minds and our souls that we have locked away. And there's a dark voice inside that says, don't open the door. Don't open the door. That plays ominous music when we get near the door. So we think to ourselves, ooh, it's like a spooky Halloween horror film. Don't open the door. But the dark voice inside of us wants us to not open the door for its own reasons. What's behind the door isn't a monster that's going to jump out at us and eat us. What's behind the door is the memory of God. What's behind the door is the joy that we are naturally capable of. Even the frumpiest and dourest and saddest of us all, we are all capable of complete and profound joy. That is what Jesus tells us. And it's not some brand new gift that we get just because Jesus came around and said, here's the way to have complete joy. No, he's pointing out the obvious. It wasn't obvious to his students. It may not be obvious to us, but it was obvious to him. And he had that joy. And so do we. Amen.